done to try to say that the media missed this story. They didn't miss this story. Ultimately, the people at fault are Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, every elected member of Congress. The Democratic Party let that disaster happen.
Chuck Todd also says if anybody in the media did cover up for Biden, it was hosts like Matt Allen Lemon, opinion people. The journalists, he says they didn't cover up for Joe at all.
The media's got plenty of things to attack them for, and there are MSNBC and CNN and pundits that absolutely carried water for Joe Biden, but they're not journalists. They're former strategists that carried water for Joe Biden.
Which journalist broke the news that Biden was half dead? Name one. Chuck's former colleague, Chris Cillizza, thinks Chuck's a fool. He says, of course the journalists were in on it. Listen.
Most reporters, not everybody, but the reporters that vote, there's study after study, they tend to choose Democratic candidates much more than Republican candidates. To me, there was a willingness to say he's okay in a way that I'm not sure that would have happened if there had been a Republican in the White House.
But now that Joe Biden's out of office, Democrats are saying, you know who's really mentally unfit? Trump.
Donald Trump spent the last year and a half questioning the cognitive ability of President Joe Biden, notwithstanding many of the legislative accomplishments that Donald Trump could only wish he got over the finish line. And so I think it's fair that a lot of Americans across the country that I run into are questioning whether Donald Trump is actually fit at this point to be able to carry out the duties of the United States of America in terms of being the president and the commander-in-chief.
When the media and the Democrats are arguing over who told bigger lies to Americans, they're in trouble. Hoover Institute fellow VDH is here. So they haven't really come to terms with what happened, have they?
No, they're joined at the hip with the Democratic Party. They didn't ask one question in those daily press conferences about Joe Biden's cognitive decline. They know it. It's a larger symptom, Jesse. They have no institutional power, no legislative power, no executive order power. The Supreme Court's going to overturn eventually their cherry-picked judges. Then you turn to the alternate agenda. There's no contract for America. There's no shadow government. There's no rising Bill Clinton or a young Barack Obama like. Then you look at the good old days, they can't say, well, we've got to go back to that open border, or we had that 10 million illegal aliens, or that brilliant Afghanistan rescue, or flight. We had 2 theater wars. Wasn't that good in Ukraine and the middle? They have nothing they don't want to go back, and so they're just left with Donald Trump, and the media and the Democrats join in. So they use the S word, the F word, they get petty. He wore a blue suit at a Vatican funeral. They have nothing, and they're frustrated. I think the real frustration is that in the first 100 days, for all of the media hysteria, slight slippage maybe in some of the polls, Donald Trump is on the cusp. If he cuts a deal, and I think there's a likelihood he could in Ukraine, and if he does a deal with the 6 or 7 entities that are responsible for most of the trade deficit, China, the EU, the Asian nations, Canada and Mexico, this economy is going to boom. And they know it, and they're just bystanders. So they're just rooting for the other side and for failure. But Donald Trump in a month from now can be in a great position, and that's what they're terrified of.
Right, and then they're going to have come out against all of these great deals that are doing very well for the American people. Someone said something very insightful. For once, it wasn't from you. It was a former Kamala staffer, Victor Davis Henson. She says this: if you think the system is broken, we've been the ones defending it. I've come up through a party that clings to TV ads and news releases, holding on to a media environment that stopped existing a decade ago. A party that thought Barack Obama's cultural cool would last forever, and that young voters were table stakes. I have to say, she kind of nails it.
Yeah, he does. If you take a very calm, dispassionate view, there is no alternative to the basic Trump agenda. You have to cut the $2 trillion budget deficit. You have to deal with a $37 trillion debt. You have to deal with a $1.2 trillion trade deal. You can argue about the methodology, but they have to be addressed. No nation can survive with 10 million people flooding in or an open border. They know all that. and they can't think of anything else other than the trajectory that Trump is on. Because they agree, they might have a little softer, calmer, gentler, kinder approach, but they know that's the only solution. And so all they can do is either attack Donald Trump or hope that he fails by opposing the solutions that they know are the only fixes for these terrible existential problems.
No, it's